Hi guys, thank you so much for checking out this video. This is another video in my series of tutorials made for beginners, and today I'm going to show you how you can use NURBS surfaces for your modeling. You have already learned how to use curves, and if this is the first video you are watching, feel free to check out my previous video because you will need to know how to work with curves before you can build surface based on the curves. And let me just show you a very quick example of how useful NURBS surface it could be for modeling. As you can see, every curve are separated from each other. Let me show you very quickly pipelines that you can use, and later on I will explain much more about every aspect of creating NURBS surfaces. So let me just select the first shapes that I want to build. Based on these 4 curves, go surface, choose square. Then I can do the same with selecting that curve again and select the other 4 curves, surface, square. So now I have 3 NURBS surfaces. I can go modify, convert, NURBS to polygons and go into settings. I'll reset settings. I will choose quads. I will use general and keep everything by default. I click apply. I have converted it into a polygon shape. Let's do it again. Let's go to modify, convert, NURBS to polygon. Next one, modify, convert, NURBS to polygon. So now I'm going to hide all my NURBS surfaces, and let me show you something. After you converted NURBS surface into polygon shape, if you keep the history on, which you should do by default, you can get access to the settings in your attribute editor. If you go to NURBS tessellate node, just here, in general tessellation options, you can still adjust number of polygons and they will align with your curves. If I go into wireframe mode, so I select my next polygon shape here, and I do the same. I want to make sure that it has exactly the same amount of divisions here, because at the end I'm going to merge all this shape together. I'll add some more on that side, and let's do it again. I'll add some divisions on U number, and I'll add some divisions on V number. And now what happens? We have all these curves, all the NURBS surface that are hidden in outliner currently, and we also have our polygon shapes that have been converted from NURBS, and I have full control over how many divisions I want to have on every shape. And because we have history, as I mentioned before, what we can do, we can select any curve and go to control vertex mode, and for example, we can keep adjusting our curve, and I will adjust NURBS surface, and all the history from NURBS surfaces will also be connected to our polygon shapes. So we have a full control over how we want to adjust our shape. What if I want to make it wider here and adjust that corner? I select the curve, I go to control vertex, I select this one and I start moving. It breaks the shape because the curves stopped being connected together. So let's undo that. And what we can do, we can select another curve, go to control vertex and select another curve. Oops. Go to control vertex, and now we can select 3 control vertices at once and move them. And at some point where you're happy with your model, you can just select your polygons. Let's move pivot back and let's duplicate them. Right mouse button, we can combine them together. Go into vertex, we'll select all these vertices here, and we can just merge them, just like that. And we can do the same here, merge best by distance. And yeah, this is a very useful pipeline for building different shapes. I hope you want to learn more, so let's start. In Maya, there are 2 main types of geometry you can create. You can create polygon geometry or NURBS geometry. And by default, you would use polygon geometry most of the time, and NURBS geometry is more like additional tool for you to create some basic shapes that is much easier to work with, as I showed you before. If you click Shift and right mouse button, you'll see that all of it are polygon geometry. When you want to create NURBS, you need to go to the menu, Create NURBS Primitives. Here you can see all the different type of NURBS primitives. So let's create one NURBS sphere, move it somewhere here, and one polygon sphere. So this is polygon sphere and this is NURBS sphere. First of all, you'll see difference in outliner because they will have different icons. Then if you check components with right mouse button, you'll see that NURBS object has isoparm, control vertex, surface patch, surface points, and so on. Polygon object will always have edge, face, vertex, vertex face, UV, and so on. I'm going to cover all the polygon modeling and different ways to work with poly models in my next video. So for now, I will delete my poly model and let's have a closer look at our NURBS geometry and what components it has. First of all, it's control vertex. We already know control vertex from curves, and basically all NURBS objects are created with curves. So for example, I can select some vertices and I can move them around. Technically what happens, I'm moving the curve that is part of my NURBS surface, and because of that I change the surface just like that. When you want to select, for example, all of these vertices, you can use hull. So for example, I can select any hull and I can move it just like that. Then I can select this hull and maybe make it wider. So basically hull will select all the vertices that attach to that curve, or we can do the same vertically. So for example, if I select this hull, it would highlight me all the vertices that I have on this side, and with Shift I can select another side, and now I can adjust all those, for example. So let's undo that. So the next one is isoparm and surface point. When you want to create additional hull or two hulls that would intersect each other, so let's start with isoparm. So the way it works, you need to click, hold and drag any edge on the object, and it will highlight it in red, and then when you release, you will see a little dotted line. So if we go to surface, and I will detach this menu so we can have a quick access to all these things. So for example, I can insert isoparm here, and now as you can see, I have extra edge with control vertices that I can keep adjusting. If I delete all the history, I will be able to move them and keep adjusting them just like that. Let's go back to object mode, and the next one is surface point. Basically it's the same, only it creates two markets for two isoparms. So you just move the point that intersect two edges together. So now I can also insert isoparms, and it will create two isoparms. We also have surface patches. For example, one of the reasons you might want to select surface patch, because you can duplicate surface patch here. Like if I click duplicate, two patches from your NURBS object into another NURBS object. And let me show you something else, but for that I need to have a curve on my surface. So I can select my NURBS and make it live here. I'll go to create, and I'll go create curve tool and just choose any curve really. So I'll make a curve like that, and when you use live object on NURBS geometry, it automatically creates a curve on the surface, which is a slightly different type of curve, and I'm going to talk about it later on this video. But now we have a curve and we have a surface. I'll select my objects and I'll select curve and I'll choose trim tool. When you use trim tool, you need to select an object that you want to keep like that and click enter. And now technically we just made a hole in our NURBS geometry. And this is something you are not going to do that often, and I'm going to explain it a little bit more later on. So now what happens is also we won't be able to select this curve anymore. If you click right mouse button, you'll see a new component, trim edge, which we haven't seen before. And now if I select it, I can select the same curve that I used to be able to select just as a curve. So trim edge is like additional components that appears when your NURBS object has trim like that. Also, when you use planar, it will also create a trim edge and some other commands that we're going to look through very soon. So yeah, as you can see, you can start working with creating NURBS primitives, but to be honest, most of the time you're not going to use primitives. You are going to use curves, and then you'll create different surfaces based on your curves. Okay, so now let's have a look at other commands and tools here and how else we can create NURBS geometry. First one I want to talk is planar. Let's open settings and reset settings. I will select my curve that I have just created and click apply. As you can see, it's very simple to understand what it does. It just creates NURBS geometry within your curve, using it as a shape. The very important thing to be considered, you need to be sure your curve is completely flat. Otherwise, planar won't work. For example, if I select my curve and choose control vertex like this one, and I'll start moving it, and as you can see, planar disappear. Also, you still have it in outliner because it has been created, but you don't see anything, and it's because not all the vertices are in the same axis. It's easy to fix. For example, if I select all the vertices and I will scale it to 0, just like that, you see, the moment it reaches 0, you can see our planar again. And of course, like anything with NURBS, if you want to adjust your shape after you create a planar, you can do that, as long as you keep all the vertices within the same axis. Like, for example, I can only move it like that. However, if I select the surface itself, not a curve, we can go to control vertex and we can move control vertices to change the shape. For example, if I select those, and I can move them and get my shape even like that. You see? And the other thing, of course, because it's NURBS surface, we can also add more vertices. I might want to have a vertex in the middle of that shape. All I need to do is select my NURBS surface, click right mouse button, choose surface point, place marker somewhere in the middle where I think I want to have my point, then go to surfaces, insert isoparms. Now if I go to control vertex mode again and select this middle vertex, and I can move it just like that, and as you can see, very quickly I can create quite interesting shape based on a planar and a curve. There is a few settings in a planar options. To be honest, I usually use it by default. Let me show you the difference. For example, let's duplicate our curve. And if I choose linear degree and click apply, at first it will look exactly the same, but you can see here that I actually have less control vertices. And if I try to move it, you will just... And once again, I'm moving my NURBS geometry, not the curve, because as soon as I start moving any curve points, it will break planar. So yeah, as you can see, it uses the same logic. So cubic will give you smooth surface, and linear will give you that edgy surface. Let's do the same. Let's just add a surface point and insert isoform and choose control vertex. And so this is the difference between linear and a cubic. Next one is curve range, complete or partial. To be honest, I'm not sure it's very useful for planar. I will show you how it works in loft. For planar, you can just keep complete. And output geometry, you can create NURBS and you can create polygons. And this is exactly the same settings you will see when you convert NURBS into polygons. And again, this is something I'll show you probably closer to the end of this video. I will keep all the geometry I create in NURBS, and I will explain how to transfer it to polygons later on. Let me show you something else before we move to loft. Let me just delete all of that. And let me show you how else you can use planar. For example, I have just duplicated this curve, and if I select two curves like that and click planar, you'll see I can create a surface with a hole inside it. It doesn't always work in a way you expect it to work, but nonetheless, it's still useful. And again, as just like with the previous example, I can always use, I can always adjust my curves after I created planar. And if I select a planar surface itself and go in the channel box, if for some reason the hole doesn't look right and you want to invert it, you can do it here. I have just highlighted attribute, and with middle mouse button, I just click and drag to switch it on. And yeah, this is something you can do if you want to invert your planar, just like that. And now let's look at the other quite useful tool, loft. I'll open the settings and just reset settings. Loft will connect 2, 3, 4 and more curves together. For example, if I duplicate this one and move it somewhere here, and select this one and click apply, it will create loft. We can use two-sided lighting for now, so we don't see black faces. Let's have a look at the settings that we have here. So first of all, it's parameterization, and I suggest just keep it uniform. If you want to know more about parameterization, you should watch my previous video where I talked, when I briefly explained what difference between those two. After reverse, when you use after reverse on and you rotate one of the curve, eventually you will hit the point where it will just reverse itself, so that you have so that your geometry won't mess too much. If you switch it off, and let's try again, let's delete this loft and turn off after reverse and click apply. And now when we select one of the curve and start rotating it, you see it won't try to reverse your curve, it will just keep messing it just like that. The next one is a surface degree, and let's do it again, and this time I want to move that one a little bit. So now let's use 3 curves, and I'll select first one, second one and third one. And by the way, the order of selection is important, and keep it in mind that Maya will consider the order of selection of your curves. So let's try to use a cubic and click apply, and we got this nice and smooth loft. Let's undo that, choose linear, click apply, and as a result, as you can see, we have our linear surface instead of cubic. Section spans, you can add more spans if you want. For example, let's do 4 and click apply. And yeah, now we have more spans in between. So if we select our loft and we'll try to make some adjustments, we actually have more control over it, for example. let's undo that. Switch it back to 1. Complete or partial. If you choose partial and you click apply, so in the channel box in your lofted surface shape node, you will find all the 3 curves, and you can change minimum and maximum value for any of them. Again, I don't think that could be useful because you see now loft only uses this part of the curve and not whole curve, because I changed value to 0.6, so let's put it back to 1. And for output geometry, again, I'll just keep NURBS for now, but you can also get polygons if you want. There's another settings I have missed, it's closed. Basically what it does, it will close your shape. For example, let's delete this loft and let's create another shape here. And let me just select all of them and click apply. And now if I select close and click apply, you see it will just close the first and the last one, which again could be quite handy sometimes. With loft, sometimes you can have different issues, depends on where seam of your curve is located. And also, if you use Bezier curve, often you will need to convert them into a regular NURBS curve. I'll create a P-curve tool and something like that. Then I'll create Bezier curve tool. Let's change the shape. Something like that. And go to object mode. I'm pretty sure now when I try to do loft, it won't look right because start and end of every curve are placed in opposite direction. Let's try to use loft now. Let's go into settings and reset settings and click apply. You see what happens? It definitely doesn't look right. So let's undo that. Let's check control vertex. So this curve, so my bottom curve has U here, and my top curve has U here. To make sure your loft works correctly, you need to have seams approximately on the same line. So in this case, the easiest way would be to fix my EP curve. I will select curve and I will close it with open close curves. And now my curve is periodic, and I check again where exactly I have a starting point of my Bezier curve. So it's somewhere here. I select my EP curve again, choose curve point and place curve point somewhere, I don't know, perhaps somewhere here. Go in curve menu and move seam. And now let's try it again. I'll select this curve and click loft. And yeah, that looks much better. And this is exactly what I would expect, except if you can see back faces. And this is something you can reverse in surface menu if you go reverse direction and just click here. However, if you ever need to move seam on a Bezier curve, it doesn't always work the same way, and one of the way would be to convert your curve into Bezier curve to NURBS, and now I can work with it just the same way when I can have it closed, and with a curve point anywhere on my curve I can move the seam to match the other curves. And now let's have a look at the most famous NURBS surface command, revolve. For that, I have just created this Bezier curve, and pay attention to pivot, because when you use revolve, the position of your pivot is very important, because with default settings, revolve will work around your pivot point. So let's go to the settings and edit reset settings, and I'll select the curve and just click apply with keeping everything all the settings default. As with every NURB object, I can always go back to my curve and adjust the shape after applied revolve command. So for example, now maybe I want the shape to be a bit different, something like that. Yeah, I think I like it more like that. Let's have a look at different settings that you might find useful. I'll delete this one. I'll select the curve again. And the first one is axis preset. Axis preset will help you to choose which axis your revolve is going to use. For example, y-axis would be most common default, but let's try another one. So for example, if you have your curve in different position like that, and I'll need to choose x-axis and click apply, and now I get exactly the same result, only within different axes. You can even use free axis and just get the exact orientation you want. Let's keep it Y for now. You can also choose whether you want to have object pivot or specify pivot point. For example, 0, 0, 0 will use world origin pivot point. Let me show you the difference. If I move my curve here and choose object pivot point and click apply, you see I have exactly the same base, but if I undo that and choose 0, 0, 0 as a pivot point and click apply, it will use the middle of the word as a pivot point for revolve. And also if I start moving, and also if I select the curve and start moving it, you can adjust the shape just like that, because it will keep the same pivot that you specified here. Let's undo that, and let's move our curve back to the middle. And now you can choose surface degree, linear or cubic. When you choose linear, it do the same what I showed you in previous example. It will just create linear revolve, just like that. You can also choose different amount of segments. For example, I can put 4 segments and click apply. Now I have completely different ways. So let's undo that. Then there is a start and end sweep angles. And this is something that is also easier to do after you apply revolve in an attribute editor or in a channel box. But let me show you. If I choose 180 degree, for example, I'll get 8 segments again and switch back to cubic and click apply. It will only do revolve around the half of the model. But also if you go to channel box and click here, and with middle mouse button, you can keep adjusting it. And then there is also curve range settings, which is could be complete or partial. And again, it's something if you choose partial, you will have additional node in channel box that you can adjust after you apply command. For example, let's have our default settings back and just choose partial and click apply. If you go to channel box, and you will find a sub curve 1 and max and minimum value. And in channel box, you can still adjust values like that. By the way, if you want to click and hold middle mouse button and then control and shift, you can also change the step of your values. As you can see, I can do it on a much slower speed, just like that. And if I only hold control and middle mouse button, it will move a little bit quicker. And again, I will use NURBS as an output geometry for now, because I will show you how to convert NURBS to polygons at the end of this video. Let's have a look how to use Bevel Plus. I'm going to omit Bevel because it has the same settings and basically it's the same tool. The only difference that Bevel Plus also create top and bottom surfaces and also has a style preset, so I recommend using Bevel Plus instead of Bevel. So let's reset settings, select our curve and click apply. So Bevel Plus would extrude your curve and also add beveled edges to your shape, and you will also have a top and bottom surface as if you were creating planar. To work with Bevel Plus, you follow the same rules like when you create a surface with planar. All the points need to be flat and within one axis, like that. There is a few settings you can use. Let's have a look in Attribute Editor in our Bevel Plus shape. So you can choose whether you want to create bevel at start or at the end. Then you have bevel width. You can choose whether you want to have your bevel inside or outside. Bevel depth. And extrude distance. Also, you can decide whether you want to have any top faces on top or on the bottom, or you want to remove them like that. The other settings that are not available in Attribute Editor, it's different styles that you can use before creating your bevel. For example, let's delete that. And let's choose something else. And click Apply. You can open Bevel Plus options and try out all of them and to see what interesting results you can get from different style presets. You also have output options, again, where you can choose whether you want to have polygons or NURBS. And by the way, with Bevel Plus, I do recommend using polygons because when you create that complex shape with NURBS, you will often find a little bit errors here and here. It would be easier to use polygons, and you can also play with those settings. For example, along execution would refer to vertical lines, and along curve would refer to horizontal lines. For example, if I choose 16 here and leave 1 here and click Apply, your output geometry will look like that. You see it's very dense in one direction, but not that dense in another. Let's undo that and let's do opposite and click Apply. Now it's other way around when you have a lot of density here but not on the vertical lines. And the other way for a polygon output, you can choose between sampling or a count. In a count, you just put a number of faces that you want to have as a result, and let's keep 200 and click Apply. Let's delete our bevel again and select the curve and click Apply. I normally use sampling with this default settings, and then when I get my polygon geometry, I can just manually move around edges or delete some of them if I feel like they're too dense. Yeah, let's delete it again. And just as a planar, you can create inside shape too. And in the settings, there's also inner bevel styles that you can choose. Let me duplicate this curve and place it somewhere in the middle. Now I will select those two curves and click Apply. If I'm not happy with the middle part of the bevel, I can undo that. I can uncheck same as outer style, and perhaps I'll try convex in instead and click Apply. As you can see, I have different style of bevel inside my shape as well as outside. And now let's talk about curves on surfaces, which is different types of curves in Maya that you can use. The easiest way to get curve on surface would be to select your NURBS object and make it live here. And then you can use any curve tool and create a curve, for example, something like that. And now when I switch leave objects off, and if you don't know what leave object means, it makes your object act as a magnet and everything you move would stick to it. But right now I have switched leave object off. If you look in Outliner, if I select this object, it will also highlight the curve, because now this curve became a curve on surface and it's attached to my surface. For example, I can still select it if I use isoparm selection, and I can move it around, and as you can see, it would just move and stick to the object. I will delete it for now, and The other way to get curve on surface would be projection. So for example, I'll select this curve. I'll make my object leave once again, just so I can attach this curve to the object. When I select the curve and I start moving it, see what happens. It would just attach to the object with a pivot point. Leave object off and I'll rotate it and perhaps make it slightly smaller. So now I have my curve positioned next to my NURBS object. If I select curve and then select the object, I can go to surfaces and choose project curve on surface. And we got our projection, but perhaps I'll undo that and go and check the settings. Reset settings. I will choose active view instead of surface normal, and I'll find the view from the camera that I think looks right. I will try that and click apply. And now I have slightly better result. And by the way, if you keep the history on, you can still adjust your projection if you move the original curve, just like that. I'll select the object and I will delete the history. So this is another way you can have surface on the curve. And you might use it for animation, you might use it with a trim tool. And for surfaces on the curve that attach to your NURBS geometry, you can also use offsets. If I select it and I go to curve, I've set the curve on surface. I'll use hotkey T to show manipulator and we'll try to use it. And I'll go to settings and choose cut loops. Yeah, that looks good. So let's try to use trim, and I'll go back to object mode. I'll use trim tool and I will select that I want to keep this part and click enter. Now I can see there is a nice hole that looks quite interesting. And the other way to create a curve on surface is intersect two NURBS objects. For example, I just duplicate this one and I can place it like that. I can select two of them and click intersect. And now I have a curve between two NURBS objects. You can always select the curve and go into curve menu and just duplicate surface curve. I'll just attach them. So I have a curve that plays perfectly between those two objects, and I can make something out of it. I can create a sweep mesh, for example. I'll cover sweep mesh when I talk about polygons. So yeah, I don't know what that it looks like. I guess it's sort of twin pods, but I hope it will give you a good idea of how you can use curves on surfaces and how you can separate or convert any curves on your NURBS geometry into curve on surface or into separate curve that will be aligned with your geometry. And you can use it in your modeling. And also you can convert into separate curve, any curve on your surface. For example, if I select this isoparm here, I will go curves and duplicate surface curve again. You see I have another curve here, and it's not surface curve anymore or isoparm, it's just a completely separate curve. I can go and create sweep mesh again and get it aligned perfectly with the surface of my model. So now let's have a look how you can use extrude. To create extrude, you need to have two curves. One will be your profile and another one will be your path. The best way to do it would be to place your profile curve at the starting point of your path. So let's do that. I'll select this curve, I'll hold C, and with middle mouse button, I'll snap it to my path. I'll select my profile, I will select path, and let's open settings, reset settings, and click apply. So basically it creates, so it would use the amount of vertices you have on your curve and Based on that, it will build this new surface. Let's have a look what settings we have. If we go to Attribute Editor and open Extrude Settings, we can check some of the settings here. For example, we are using tube as an extrude type, and you can also use flat. As you can see, if you look from this angle, you'll notice that our profile were moved along the curve without rotation. There's also rotation and scale. You can scale the ending point like that. You can also rotate the ending point. And when you reach 360, you can always go higher than that. You can always try 900. And yeah, as you can see, you get much more intense rotation. Let's move it back. So let's have a look at other extrude options that could be useful. We already looked at the difference between flat and tube. Let me show you how distance works. Distance will create extrude based on your curves, basically by just lifting them like a regular extrude. For example, I can select this profile and let's reset settings, choose distance, click apply. You can use multiple curves for distance. As you could see, by default, you would use your profile orientation. If you look at y-axis for this profile, this is how distance will work. However, if you want to use a world axis orientation, you can change direction to specify and choose, for example, y-axis. Let's add more distance and click apply. And now you can see that you got perfect vertical extrude, and this could be useful if you're using multiple curves and all of them has different normals or orientation. Let's go back to tube and let's delete this one. As I told you before, the best way to get your extrude is to align your profile and your path perfectly. But if for some reason you can do it, then you can try to use those settings. I would say generally they're a little bit tricky to use and you don't always get predictable result. Oh, and by the way, the selection order is also important. First you need to select a profile and then path. And if you do it other way around, for example, I select this one and I select this one and I click apply, then I would use the other curve as a profile and this one as a path. So we'll select our profile, we'll select our path, choose tube, and result position would be at profile and click apply. But because it's using closest endpoint, it got messed up. So in this case, we should use component pivot and click apply. Yep, that looks reasonably better. Let's undo that. And now let's change result position to at path. Then your profile curve should be moved to your path, even if it's placed somewhere else, like in this example. Let's click apply. That works. But again, it's always easier to align all of them together before you do extrude, because often those settings won't fix some of the errors you might have. And now let's have a look at another interesting tool in Maya called birail. It's the same extrude. Instead of using just one path, you can use two curves for two paths. Let's try the first one and go into settings, reset settings. If nothing is selected and I click birail 1 tool, here in the left bottom corner you can see a little help that will help you to work with this tool. So currently it said select the profile curve and select two rails curves. So with shift I select another one and another one. And Maya build me that shape. It's a really good tool and very useful because, as you already know, if you select curve, go to control vertex, and we can keep adjusting the shape as well as our profile curve, just like that. So let's delete it and let's look at the settings that we have. There are a few settings in birail options, but the most important here is rebuild. Sometimes when you use birail and you have different types of curves or different parameterizations in your curves, it might not work. It will look like it will still create a surface, but you won't see anything in viewport. And if that happens, one of the ways to troubleshoot it will be use rebuild settings, but also you can do it manually if you go to curves and rebuild. If you want to learn more about rebuild, feel free to check out my previous video. If you face any issue with your surfaces when you create surfaces but you don't see anything in viewport, the first thing you can do is try to rebuild all the curves and see if that fixes your error. So yeah, with birail, I don't tend to use it very often, and generally I just keep all the settings, all the default settings. And let me show you how you can use birail 2 and 3 tools. Birail 2 tools will allow you to do the same, only you can use multiple profiles, so I'll duplicate that curve. The only thing, you always need to make sure that all your profile curves are connected to your path curves, so they need, otherwise it won't work. And let's try to change the shape. Maybe let's delete this one, and maybe delete this one. So let's try to make it smoother. Okay, yeah, maybe something like that. Let's try that. We'll use birail 2 tools, reset settings. And first we need to select 2 profile curves. So I select this one and I select this one. Next I need to select 2 path rail curves. I select this one and I select this one. And as you can see, I got quite interesting shape. It combined the first profile curve I have with my second profile curve, and also used the path curves to build it. You can adjust curves, but you need to be very careful not to move the corners, otherwise it will break it. But you can also adjust a surface. So if I select the surface, and I can make adjustments. And the last one, it's the same, only you can use 3 or more profiles. Let's try that. Let's reset settings. So first you need to select any number of profile curves. So we select 1, 2, 3, and there could be more. So here you need to click enter, and then you can select 2 rail curves. 1, 2. Yeah, it worked. It's a very strange shape. It did exactly the same. From our first profile curve, it merged it with the second profile curve and with the third profile curve. And yeah, this is how you can use birail 1, 2 or 3 plus tools. So the next 2 tools I want to talk about is boundary and square. They're very similar, and let's start with the square. I will reset settings. Square will create a surface based on 4 curves. The main condition is that those curves need to intersect with each other. The difference between square and, for example, planar, they don't have to be within the same axis orientation. So basically they don't have to be like flat surface. I added those peaks on this curve to show you. Also, square works only with 4 curves, so 1, 2, 3, 4. So let's reset settings, select our curves and click apply. You see, on the area where curves intersect with each other, it created this surface. It doesn't have that many settings that you would want to change. From my experience, in those 3 settings for continuity type, you don't see a big difference. Sometimes it makes your surface a little bit smoother or a little bit closer to your original curves. So for example, let's do fixed boundary and click apply. And let's undo that and try implied target and click apply. You can see that the topology is slightly different, but nonetheless, it really doesn't matter which one you choose. So I'll keep fixed boundary. And the next one is endpoint tolerance. If your curves don't intersect perfectly, for example, if I leave this vertex, square surface will disappear, just like that. Sometimes you can try to use local tolerance and increase it to the maximum number. It's hard to see here, but I assume sometimes when you have a little, very small gaps between two curves, and you can use local tolerance on the maximum value, it might still create a square surface, even though your curves won't intersect perfectly. But again, the difference is so tiny that I just never use it, and I tend to align my curves before using square. And again, you can also rebuild your curve, and you can also do it as with all NURBS surfaces after you apply the command. In the attribute editor, you can find this node, and there will be rebuild curves options. So you can try different directions for different curves and see if it fixes your errors, or maybe if it gives you a better topology. And now let's have a look at boundary. Let's delete this one, edit reset settings, 1, 2, 3, 4, and click apply. Boundary works slightly different than square. It also creates surface, but you don't need to make sure that your curves intersect with each other. You would try to use the maximum of your curves to create a surface, like it would affect all the distance of the curve, and we'll also use the other curves as a guide. Boundary is not as accurate as square, and very often you might have slightly more unpredictable result with it. Boundary will work with 3 curves as well. With boundary, however, the order of selection is very important, because the last selected curve would be probably the most accurate. You will get the most accurate surface attached to curve on the last selected curve. For example, I separated my curves and moved them a little bit away from each other. And if I select this one first, and then select this one, and this one would be my last selected curve, and I click apply, you see the surface tend to build around this last selected curve more. Let's undo that. Now let's select this one, and this one, and click apply. And now the surface is connected with this curve more, and use this one more as a guide. If you have only 3 curves, it'll still create surface, but as you can see, this one was the last selected curve. It got a little bit messed up, and that's why I'm saying that boundary is not as predictable, and it's sometimes hard to understand the result. I personally would just add another curve, and probably even use square more often than boundary, unless with square, sometimes I get the error when some of curves doesn't connect, and it's just quicker to use boundary instead of square when that happens, instead of trying to troubleshoot where some of your curve might not connect perfectly. So with the settings here, you also have curve ordering, which default option would be automatic. If you choose as selected, then the selection order of your curves, not only the last selected curves would be mattered to. For example, 1, 2, 3, 4, click apply. You see I got very messed up shape because I selected them in a random order, but if I select them one by one and click apply, I basically get better result. But again, it's something I prefer to keep automatic, because usually it does a good job with understanding the shape. But if it doesn't look right, you can try use as selected and select them in the right order. Common endpoints, optional or required. Basically, when you click required, you will need to make sure all the endpoints of all your curve are connected together. Again, I don't know why you need that option, but perhaps in some cases it might be useful. And yeah, that's all the settings you need to know. And the coolest thing about all of these different NURBS surfaces that you can use is that you can share curves between them. So basically, if I create one shape here and then another shape here, I still have full control over this curve, which means you can create very complex shape with a different number of curves using all the different surface options that Maya has. let me show you now how you can convert your NURB surface into polygon. To convert your NURBS geometry into polygon, you go to Modify, Convert, NURBS to Polygon. Let's open Settings. The first settings here, it's attach multiple output meshes. If you have multiple NURBS meshes and you want to combine them together, so you'll get just one polygon shape out of them, you can use that, and it will attach different surfaces if they connect to each other. The next one is Match Render Tessellation. This one, if you choose this one, all the settings will gray out. It'll try to give you the best result it can to copy your NURBS geometry exactly as you can see it in render. Let's click Apply. Let's move our polygon. Yeah, so this is our polygon model and this is our NURBS. You usually don't get a very nice topology out of this method, but if you want to use your NURBS geometry as a high poly model, for example, and just bake it on the other mesh, then you can use that. The next one is type. You can use triangles or quads, and obviously quads are much easier to control, and you can always convert your poly models into triangles at any stage later on, so I would normally just keep quads. Then here are 4 different methods you can use. Let's have a look at each one. So the first one is general, and it'll give you an option to divide your model into U and V subdivisions. Basically, it's like vertical and horizontal line, and you can decide how many of each you want. For example, I'll click Apply. Let's move it here. It doesn't look very good at all, so let's have a look at what we can do in Attribute Editor. So in Attribute Editor, you can find a node, NURBS Tessellate. You can go there, and you can adjust U and V number after you converted it to polygons. And let's try that. You see, it starts looking a little bit better now. It works very well for NURB surfaces that doesn't have trim edges. If we go back to our previous model and go to Surface and choose Untrim. Now let's try to do the same with a slightly simpler model. I just add a bit more divisions and click Apply, and let's isolate it. And now again in Attribute Editor, you can keep adjusting or adding divisions, and it will still use the same NURB geometry you have as a container for your shape. So you can have lower subdivision level or higher. Eventually, if you get very high, then you get a really nice shape. So let's get another one. Count method is really good and it's very simple. All you need to do is specify how many polygons you want to use for your model. It's also very useful when you have a very strict limit on how many triangles or faces you should have in your model. So let's try keep 200 and click Apply, isolate that. We can go to our tessellate node and find the polygon count options and start increasing them to see if we can get better result. You see, it's pretty cool because you can also create 2 versions and then you can combine them. For example, if I want to preserve my star a little bit better here, I might want to have it, I might want to have much higher polygon count here, but the overall shape I can have slightly lower, and then I can combine them together by using different polymodeling tools that I'm going to show you in my next video. Standard fit. Standard fit, it's just another method that Maya uses to convert your NURBS geometry into polygon. It has different settings, and to be honest, it's quite hard to predict what they do. So let's just apply. We can go to Attribute Editor and see if we increase the settings, if we get different results. It's probably the easiest way, the most intuitive way to change it, to be honest. Rather than trying to figure out what combination of settings you need here, you can just play with different sliders and see what shape you will get. Maya will try to use some slightly smarter algorithm, and where shape changed more dramatically, Maya will add more subdivisions, and on flatter areas like that, it will try to keep less. And control points. Control points will try to use your original NURBS geometry topology, and based on that, it will convert it to polygons, and it will try to have topology as close as possible to the original NURBS. So, but it doesn't have any settings, so it's quite hard to control. Let's duplicate it and click apply. Yeah, so as you can see, it doesn't look exactly like our original one, although we can always have a smooth preview if we click 3 on keyboard. In some cases you can get slightly better result, but with this one I would personally choose general or count. So let me show you a very quick example how I would model, for example, this shape on the gramophone. I will start with primitives, and I'll create circle. I'll check control vertices, and I think I want to have more, so I'll go curve, rebuild, and I'll choose 16 as the number of spans and click apply. Now I'm going to convert this shape into Bezier curve. You don't have to do it, but I found it easier to work with Bezier. NURBS curve to Bezier, object mode. I'll duplicate that. We'll scale. Now I will select every second control vertex, for example this one. Now I can use scale tool to scale them, maybe something like that. Now with shift right mouse button, I will make all of them like corners. Go back to object mode, select my first curve and my second curve, then go surfaces, loft, we'll check settings, click apply. That looks good. I'll go to attribute editor and I will add some divisions that I can use. Maybe, well, maybe something like that. I'll select my top curve and I'll move it a little bit more, and I'll also scale it. Perhaps something like that. Now I can select my surface and I can use halves to adjust the shape, again with the scale tool. I can move it like that. Yeah, maybe something like that. Looks quite good. Now I will duplicate it and I can convert it into polygons. Modify convert NURBS to polygons. Go into settings. Maybe we'll add some more subdivisions, so we'll see, and click apply. Let's isolate that. I'll go to settings and here I can decide how many polygons I need. So yeah, as you can see, and it's a quite easy way to get a nice polygon shape. And thank you so much for watching this video and for making it to the end. If you find this video useful, please give me a like or subscribe to my channel to see more. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in my next video.